Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live stream broadcast service. We are so glad that you're joining us this morning. My name's Becky. I'm part of our campus team here at Orion, and we are in our final week of our Defining Moment series. It's been a really cool series where we've been having one of our teaching pastors from one of our campuses share a defining moment on video, and then we have our pastor walk us through the message. So today, Dave Wilson is here with us to lead us through the message, and we're also going to be doing our annual vote today. So we want to encourage you, as you're watching online, you can vote too. You can go to our Kensington app, or you can go to the website, kensingtonchurch.org/vote, and you'll be able to join us in that. And we also would love to invite you to come here and be with us next week for our special Father's Day message. So thanks again for tuning in. We love that you are part of our family here at Kensington. We'd love to meet you in person as well. So come by, join us, enjoy the service as you lean in and listen. Thank you.
All right, how many of you know that song? Yeah, you've heard that song on the radio, Chainsmokers with a combination with Coldplay. And it's interesting, that song is where we're headed today. They says, basically the idea is, I don't need a superhuman. I just need somebody I can turn to. And guess who people want to turn to when they have a need? Stay tuned. We're going to tell you later today. It just set us right where we're headed today. My name, you can't tell, I look like Dave Wilson. I just don't sound like Dave Wilson. I actually hit puberty this last week, and now I'm a man, right? Actually, I've got the flu and a cold, and so I almost didn't show up today. I sweat through this shirt first service. It was so bad. I think my fever broke during the first service, and all the sweat's gone. I had it dried, and you're getting the better version. But anyway, glad you're here. And if you're new, by the way, brand new, like first time ever here, we have a place called Starting Point in the lobby, and I'll meet you there after the service to just help you take the next step. I won't shake your hand. I won't get anywhere near you, so you don't get my bug, but I'd love to see you at Starting Point. And a lot of things going on this summer. Some of you know one of the best things we do in the summer is a thing we call Rock Your Family, which is at Spring Hill, July 13th to 15th. It's for the whole family. We started this years ago. It's a great getaway for families to have a lot of fun at Spring Hill, but it's bigger than that. It's fun and a foundation. You build your foundation of your spiritual life and your spiritual foundation for your family through Christ, the rock. That's why we call it Rock Your Family at Spring Hill. So if you haven't signed up for that, I'm telling you, it will be one of the best vacations you ever take as a family because it's bigger than a vacation. You'll come home refreshed, but you'll also come home refueled by Jesus. So it's a great time to do that. And then the only other thing I got to mention to you is what you're holding in your hand. You were given our proposed budget and elder vote for 2018-19. We vote once a year. Guess what? You showed up on the day that we actually will have you vote. We're going to have you vote right now in the service because it's very important. So anyway, hopefully you looked at this. We've given this out for the last 2 weeks. It's been on our website. It's been online, and you can check it out because we don't want you to vote on new elders and also on a budget without looking at it first. So that's why we gave it out early, and you can call and you can email and ask questions, which some people have done. But anyway, we're having you vote on the new budget, which is $19.6 million. Trust me, when we started Kensington 28 years ago, we never thought we'd have a budget almost $20 million. It's unbelievable what God's done in this place. So it's an increase from last year because you've given more and keep giving more. And we have 3 new elders we're adding this year that were nominated by you, the congregation, and went through interviews and scrutiny and the whole thing. And the top 3 are who we're proposing for you to vote to be new elders added to the bottom 4, which are the current elders. And so you're voting on that as well. And that all happens in the next minute. We're going to give you a minute. There's a timer that's going to come up in a second and allow you a minute to vote. Now, here's how you can vote. You've got this Kensington voting ballot in your hand, so you can fill it out and then pass it to the middle, and our ushers will collect it. Some of you are going, wait. Does my vote count? I'm not a member at Kensington. No, it doesn't, but we want your vote anyway. Only the members' votes count, but we want everybody to fill this out because we want to know what you think. And by the way, if you're like me and you'd rather not do it paper, you can do it digital. Just go to our Kensington app. I did that this morning, and you can vote in less than a minute on our Kensington app. You'll see right there on the thing, click on it, you'll walk through it digitally, and you can do the same thing so you don't have to fill this out and pass it in. But most of you are going to fill this out because that's how most of us still do it. So take the next minute. I'll shut up. Fill this out, and then as you're done, you can fold it up if you want, pass it toward the middle, and our ushers will come get it. So take a minute to do that. Right, was a minute enough time? Hopefully it was. If you need more time, obviously take that, and you can still, again, pass it toward the middle, and our ushers will pick it up. Same thing on the wings out there. And if you need more time, later when we take the offering, if you want to, you can put it in the offering pouch as well. We are hoping you'd be able to do it now so we don't fill the offering pouch up with a bunch of ballots. So, all right, so many of you know this. Today is the final week of a 4-week series we've called Defining Moments, which has been 4 moments in the life of 4 of our teaching pastors from our campuses, talking about a moment in their life that sort of defined and shaped them, and then there's a life lesson that we've been teaching out of that. And today is Patrick Holden, who's our teaching pastor up at our Traverse City campus. By the way, if you go north this summer for a little vacay, stop in at our Traverse City campus on Sunday morning. They're doing what we're doing right now up there. And I spent Friday night and Saturday with Patrick. We did a leadership pipeline at our Troy campus. And it's interesting. His story is similar in some ways to my background with my mom. And it's a beautiful story. And it actually ties into the opening song and the song you're going to hear before his video. And then I'll come up and talk about the life lesson from that defining moment. Before we do that, go ahead, stand up, give somebody a high five, ask them if they're happy the Warriors won the NBA championship. Let's go toward the middle.
Ring the bells, this time I mean, bid the hatred fairly well. Give back the pieces of my Jesus, take your counterfeit to hell. Bang the drum, this means war, not the kind you're waiting for. You say mercy won't be rationed here, it's what we're fighting for.
Tell me what love is really for.
Does that hit too close to home? I got faith to move a mountain and to watch that mountain move. It's time for words to fall like thunder, sounds of justice breaking through.
Tell me what love is really for. And the march sings, but love breaks through the Calvary.
Kingdom where I found that I belong. I ain't scared to face the fortress. I've seen them fall before. Broken bones you built, but it crumbles board by board.
Tell me what love is really for. Hey, sing it loud enough, we'll keep on adding voices up.
Take your counterfeit to hell.
defining moment was Christmas 1999. Now, to understand some of my story, I think you kind of have to go back to the beginning. I grew up in a single-parent home. It was always just me and my mom growing up, and we were always very close. She was wanting to be a stay-at-home mom, and she wanted to be around me, but she also wanted to have a successful business and be able to provide for our family. And so what she did is she created her own business where we would travel all over the country and teach people how to play piano. And so if you can imagine this, we have this big, RV kind of motorhome thing, and we would pack 100 like small Casio, like Toys R Us type pianos in the bottom of it. And we'd go all over the country, and she would set up, and for a couple hundred people, she would teach them how to play piano. And at the same time, as we were doing this whole business thing, she found time to be involved in all the things that I cared about as well. And so I remember she got me this little like wiffle ball bat, and she got me a little wiffle ball, and so I'd go outside and just throw it up and hit it on my own. And I'll never forget the day, I was pretty young. She came out in a big baseball jersey. And if you can imagine this, the 80s, like big poofy curly hair, walked out with that and a fitted hat on top of it. And she came out and she was gonna pitch to me so that, I could learn how to hit. But by the time I got to middle school, she had been feeling not well. She hadn't been feeling well, and, she had kind of chalked it up to, maybe it was the flu, or she just wasn't, she wasn't doing well. And I remember she dropped me off at school one day, and I was there throughout the day. And about midway through, right around lunchtime, I get a call that said, "Hey, you're gonna get picked up early from school." And I remember going down to the office. I had my big book bag on, and I saw her there, and it looked like she was pretty upset. And so we got in the car, and we drove probably 2 blocks after that. And in the car, it was just silent. She hadn't said really anything, and I didn't really talk much. And we got to a red light, and there was nobody around. And at that point, she just breaks down, and she starts crying. And she said, "Patrick, I was just diagnosed with cancer today." And she kept talking from that moment on. But I mean, you know this, if you've ever had news like that, you don't really hear anything after the word cancer. Like, there was nothing else that really popped up for me. I just remember an overwhelming amount of emotion that flooded me all at the same time. As a kid growing up, in a single parent home, I would have men say, "You're the man of the house. Like, you need to, you take care of your mom." In some ways, I felt like I was stone-faced, kind of receiving everything that she was saying. And feeling like I wanted to let it all out, but that I couldn't. And so trying to be like whatever this man of the house thing is, I remember leaning over and giving her a hug. And when I gave her a hug, for the first time that I could ever remember, feeling like I was lying to my mom, saying, "It's all gonna be okay." And what happened over the next couple of days really feels like a whirlwind. We found out that day, and then 2 days later, she was in surgery. And so they did the surgery. I stayed at a friend's house, and the surgery went really, really great. Everything was successful with the surgery, but there was a long recovery period that was coming up next. Because she had been so successful in her business, we lived in a large home. We had a lot of things. I had, the basketball goal that I always wanted. I had everything that I could have ever wanted. And within about a 6-month period, because of some of the bills that we had, we lost really everything that we had. And we got to the place where we found out that we were going to lose our home. At the time where we didn't know what we were going to do, we didn't have family around. It was just me and her. Somebody from our church reached out. And they said, "Hey, we've got this really small apartment, and if you guys want to live in it for the next, 6 months or 9 months until you get back on your feet, you certainly can do that." We went over to this apartment, and we unloaded everything. My mom was still really weak through this recovery process and still not feeling, up to speed. And we got everything in the apartment, and then for the next several months after that, I think we were just kind of living. It felt like one big blur. Our lives were extraordinarily different. My mom was still recovering and struggling through how to navigate that. She wasn't working at the time, and we had been living in some ways off of our savings during this point. I'd go to school and then come back, and when I came back, the rest of my evening was in some ways trying to take care of her and do that. So towards the end of this year, we were coming up on Christmas time, and growing up, Christmas was always a really big deal at our house. My mom would decorate the whole house. I mean, she would have the most amazing tree. She'd be up on a ladder, nailing lights in and, doing the whole thing. And it was always a big deal for us. But coming up on this Christmas, obviously we were going to experience something that was very different. So early December, We were at our house, and it was around dinner time that night, and there's a knock at the door. And as soon as I opened the door, there were these 5 women that were standing there, and they just started like screaming and Merry Christmas and all of that sort of thing. They had on Santa hats and the ugliest Christmas sweaters that I think you could ever imagine. And they were all carrying these presents and lights and decorations. And in that moment, it hit me. They were here to decorate our house. They were here to give us gifts. They were here to make Christmas happen in some ways for us. After we opened the door and we see these women standing there, turning around and seeing my mom behind me. And what she was feeling in that moment was just this overwhelming joy and thankfulness. And it was something that I hadn't seen in her in a very long time. And it was something that I had been praying for, that I had been hoping for, and hoping that God would allow us to experience, during Christmas that year. But the crazy thing, it wasn't that it happened in this miraculous way. It wasn't happening in the ways that I expected. That joy that was happening in that moment was made possible because of these 5 women in my mom's small group who showed up on our behalf to give us something that we could have never given ourselves. I'll never forget opening the door and seeing Rose and seeing Michelle and seeing Karen all standing there. And I don't think they had any idea just how much they were giving us, but it was in that moment that we felt so extraordinarily loved and reminded that we weren't alone and that God was with us. And ultimately, they gave us a gift that we could have never given ourselves.
Pretty cool story, isn't it? It's interesting, when I talking to Patrick yesterday and when I watched that story, it really is similar to my life growing up with a single mom. And many of you have heard me say that, my mom, after my dad walked out and my brother died and we moved to Ohio to live near her family, we went to church every Sunday because it was the law in my house. Anybody got that law in their house? Some of you are here today because you didn't want to be, but I had to go. It didn't matter. And I didn't know till high school because we switched churches every year. I was Baptist, I was Methodist, Lutheran, Episcopalian. I always say I was a Metho, Episcopalian, I did it all. And I found out in high school is because she was trying to find a guy. She got in every singles group at every church trying to find her second husband. But here's the thing, I experienced church in every denomination almost. And the difference in my story and Patrick's story is I remember when my mom was in the hospital for almost a month in my sophomore year of high school, no one showed up. I went and lived with my grandma, but no one ever came and brought a Christmas. Nobody did that. I never saw the church, any of the churches I grew up in, ever do anything. I just thought church was a place where people went and they listened to somebody preach and they sang some songs and then they just went back to their life and did nothing and then went back. They never did anything and nobody ever showed up. So it's a defining moment for Patrick because he's like, that's what the church should be. The church is not a building, it's what? It's people, it's a congregation, it's a community of people that don't just love God, but they go out and love others with the love of God, right? And I don't know if you know this, but the song we sang before Patrick's Defining Moment video was a song written by Drew and Ellie Holcomb. And they combined with Johnny Swim to do this song. And Drew and Ellie are Steve Andrews' nephew, Drew, his sister's son, and pretty well known in Nashville. And there's a line in the song that probably irked you, like it did me the first time I heard it. Take your counterfeit to hell. I'm like, what is that about? And as you research the song and read the words, you realize ring the bells, ring the bells, ring the bells is their admonition to the church. What they're saying is be the church, be the church, be the church. Don't fake it. Take that to a really bad place. Go be the church. Not just go to church, but actually be the church. What Patrick experienced was the church being the church. They showed up when somebody was in need. As a small group of women just showed up, and he'll never forget that moment because it was a picture of what God designed the church to be. Again, it's not a building. It's people going with the love of God to love their neighbor and to love anybody that they see a need. They show up as Jesus does in their life. The church is the picture, is the visible example of God. Now here's the amazing thing. If you talk to people that don't go to church, and I know you do and I do, if you talk to people in your neighborhood or in your workplace or wherever that don't go to church, most of the time, I may be exaggerating, but I'd say 3/4, if not 80% of the time, the reason they don't go to church is not often because they don't like the church. Now, sometimes it's that, but I've found in discussions it's often they don't like people that they've gotten to know that are church people. How many people would say that's true, people you know? Anybody? Yeah. A lot of hands are going up because like there's some person or a group of people that have turned them off that are Christ followers that didn't live like Christ followers. And it wasn't the church per se, the institution, it was these people or that person. I'll never forget years ago walking in the Detroit Lions locker room on a weekday when we had just signed a new player from another team to take a position we really needed. I'm not going to tell you his name because I didn't ask him permission to share his story. So I'll make up a name. His name was George, okay? And George, I'd read about his previous team and what he'd done, and now he's on our team, and we needed this guy. And I walk in the locker room that day as the Detroit Lions chaplain just to do what I do, and I ended up talking to a guy that's a part of our ministry named Don. And so Don and I are talking, and this new player walks up. He doesn't know me. He barely knows Don. He's just gotten to know him, but they're going to be close because they do almost a similar part of the thing on the football team. And so Don and I are talking. He introduced me to this guy, George. That's not his real name, but he says, hey, this is George. He doesn't tell George who I am. And we're just having a good time laughing. And I can tell George likes me and I like George. And even though we don't know each other, and I know this, George doesn't know what I do. At this point, he thinks I'm a doctor or a trainer or an equipment guy. He has no idea what I do. And then somewhere in the conversation, Don says, oh, by the way, George, Dave is our team chaplain. And the second he said chaplain, this player went like that. I mean, he literally like stepped back. I mean, it was so physically visible. It's like he recoiled when he heard the word chaplain. Well, some of you know me well enough to know that I'm going to address that. So I go, George, what was that? He goes, what? I go, when you heard I was the chaplain, you like stepped back. He goes, no, I didn't. And I go, yeah, he did. He goes, no, I didn't. And then Don goes, yeah, he did. I go, what was that all about? He goes, oh, nothing. Well, I got to know George over the next several days and weeks, and I found out exactly what I just told you. I said, dude, did you have a bad experience on your other team with the team chaplain? He goes, no, I don't have a bad experience with team chaplain or even church in general, but I've had a bad experience. And he named this guy who was on the team that was an outspoken Christian that didn't live like that. And he goes, that just turns me off, and you represent that. And I thought, that is so often the story. It isn't the church that turns people off, although that does happen as well. It's church people or Christians. Why? Because often we don't do what Patrick saw those women do. We preach love and grace and forgiveness. We don't often live that. And so it's really interesting. If we, the church, and if you're not a follower of Christ today, I think you're going to agree with everything I'm going to say, because you're going to be like, that is something that would be appealing to me. In fact, I wrote this down yesterday just as a last thought. I thought Christians should be magnets who attract, not repel. Christians should be magnets who attract people to the love of God, not repel people away. And so often, it's not the case. So I'm going to tell you right now, fasten your seatbelts. I'm going to encourage us, hopefully inspire us to be the church, to ring the bells, like when we walk out of here, let's go do what God calls us to do. Because it's really interesting. When Jesus was talking to his disciples about what the future would look like and how they would show the world that they're followers of Jesus Christ, you know what he said? Well, it's in the New Testament, the fourth book in the New Testament, a gospel called the Gospel of John. And John's writing in a sort of an eyewitness account of the things Jesus did. I'm only going to read you 2 verses today. The whole day is built on 2 verses, but it's in John chapter 13. And some of you know your Bible, you know the beginning of John 13 is a very pivotal moment in Jesus' life because it's where they're in the upper room and Jesus washes the disciples' feet. Now think about what just happened here. The most important person in the universe just took the lowliest, humblest position of a servant to wash the disciples' feet. By the way, why didn't somebody else wash their feet? Because they were all having an argument about who will be the greatest in the kingdom of God. See how the church functions often? We're often thinking of ourselves as somebody else. And Jesus says at the end of this, as he washes their feet, I did this as an example that you should do likewise. You should wash the feet of your neighbor. You should wash the feet of a family member who's far from God that maybe is your enemy. I just gave you an example. And then right after that, he makes this comment that I know a lot of you have heard before, but he says this. He says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Now, you've got to put yourself in the disciples' mindset. They're sitting there, and he just said, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. They've got to be like, it's like Peter's going to raise his hand and go, well, that's not new. What do you mean new commandment that you love one another? That's all the way back in the Old Testament. That's always been the commandment of God. So love God and love others. Love God and love others. You want to know the evaluation of your entire life? Right there it is. It's that simple. Do I love God today? Did I love others today? Did I love God, and out of that, did I overflow that love to others? So when Jesus says this is a new commandment, they've got to be thinking there's nothing new about that. But Jesus is using the word new, which means the old is done. It's no longer active. The new has been brought here. Like if you get a new phone, don't you look at your other phone and say, that's my old phone? This is my new phone. This replaces that phone. Like if you don't have the iPhone 10, I mean, hello, you got to get it, right? I don't either. Anyway, but it's like when you get a new phone, you replace the old. So when he says a new commandment, he's saying the old, which you knew from the Shema, back in Deuteronomy, love God and love your neighbor as yourself, which I now have on my wedding band. It's pretty cool. When we were in Israel, my wife found a jeweler in the old city, and he sold me this wedding band that spins. It's really cool, and on it in Hebrew is the Shema, the Lord our God is one. And it's the whole idea of love God, love others. And then he says this, a new commandment I give you now. Here's what's new. Watch this. That you love another. Here's where it's different. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. And by this love, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Now, some of you Bible scholars out there are looking at that. What's new about what Jesus said? Just as I have loved you. You get it? See, the old commandment was love others as you love yourself, right? Now he says, the new commandment is love others as I have loved you. He's raising the bar to say, I just gave you a visible example of how you love others. You humbly serve them, and whatever their need is, you walk across your backyard to your neighbor and you wash their feet. Now, literally, don't go over to your neighbor today and say, hey, I want to wash your feet. Can you take your shoes off? You'll freak them out. Don't do that. But walk over to your neighbors this afternoon, and when they have a need in their life, you show up. You bring the Christmas tree to their front door if that's what their need is. Their son or daughter's in a hospital and you show up. Or something's going on in your life and you show up with a meal. You understand what I'm saying? That's what he's saying. As I have loved you, love one another. It's interesting. I just jotted them out in my notes. We could spend a whole day. How has Jesus loved you? Unconditionally, sacrificially, unending, pursuing. And as I'm writing these down just off the top of my head, all the things I know about Jesus' love, and we could do this all day, I found myself writing down these words. He loves us with an overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love. I'm like, ever heard those words before? Yeah, I tried to get Josh Korn, the first service, to come out and sing that chorus for you. It's a song called Reckless Love. How many know it, right? It's the overwhelming never. I would do it. I would grab the guitar and do it. You guys know it. I do it all the time. You're like, please, Dave, don't do that again. And I'm not doing it today because I couldn't sing it if I wanted to, even if I had a normal voice. But I'd be like, the overwhelming. I'm so deep right now. So I don't want to sing it, and Josh wouldn't come out and sing it. But I want to read you the words of that song. Just the chorus and the bridge. Because if you want to know what the love of God looks like, and if you want to know how God has loved you, and out of that love we're supposed to love others, this captures it really well. Corey Asbury, who lives over in Kalamazoo, wrote this song. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Now, some of you church people know what that reference is, but that's Luke 15, where Jesus says the shepherd leaves the 99 found sheep to find the one. That's reckless. That's like, who would do that? God would do that. He goes on to say, I couldn't earn it. I don't deserve it. Still, you give your love yourself away. That's the gospel. We don't deserve it. Still, he gives it away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Here's the bridge. There's no shadow you won't light up, no mountain you won't climb up coming after me. And by the way, I grew up thinking, yeah, God's coming after me. God's pursuing me, but it's not because he loves me. It's because he wants to judge me. And then I realized God is chasing me like my mom did when I was headed to the street when I was 4 years old and she's running after me. You see that look on her face like, oh, I'm in big trouble. But she's not getting me because I'm in trouble. She's chasing me to protect me and save me because she knows what's going to happen if I step into that street. God's pursuing you with a reckless, overwhelming love. He says there's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. If you want to know what the love of God is like, Corey captured it. And we sing that song. And it's like, that's how much God loved me. And then he says, take that love and love others. And so just yesterday, I was like looking at that song, and I've sung that song many, many times. We've sung it here before. And I just, you can do this all the time. I do this all the time. Google the story behind reckless love. And I didn't know this, but Corey Asbury had been sort of questioned by people about using a negative term like reckless to describe the love of God. And here's what he posted. Listen to this. This is so beautiful. Corey says, when I use the phrase the reckless love of God, I'm not saying that God himself is reckless. I am, however, saying that the way he loves in many regards is quite reckless. What I mean is this. He is utterly unconcerned with the consequences of his actions with regards to his own safety, comfort, and well-being. His love isn't crafty or slick. It's not cunning or shrewd. In fact, all things considered, it's quite childlike, and I might even suggest sometimes downright ridiculous. His love bankrupted heaven for you. His love doesn't consider himself first. His love isn't selfish or self-serving. He doesn't wonder what he'll gain or lose by putting himself out there. He simply gives himself away on the off chance that one of us might look back at him and offer ourselves in return. Oh my gosh, this is the love of God that you and I, many of us, have experienced. I love what he says. He says, his love leaves the 99 to find the one every time. To many practical adults, that's a foolish concept. But what if he loses the 99 in search of that one? What if finding that one lost sheep is and always will be supremely important to God? He says this, his love isn't cautious. No, it's a love that sent his own son to die a gruesome death on a cross. There's no plan B with the love of God. He gives his heart so completely, so preposterously that if refused, most would consider it irreparably broken. Yet he gives himself away again. The recklessness of his love is seen most clearly in this. It gets him hurt over and over. Make no mistake, our sin pains God's heart, and yet he forgives us 70 times 70. Yet he opens up and allows us in every time. His love saw you when you hated him, when all the logic said they'll reject me. He said, I don't care if it kills me, I'm laying my heart on the line. Oh my gosh, if you've experienced that kind of love, you should be cheering right now. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, that's the reckless, overwhelming, never, ever ending love of God for you. And here's what happens. So often when we are overwhelmed by that, we tend to do this. Oh, it's awesome. That's awesome. I can't believe you love me so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we should. Right? We should. We should stop and say, thank you for the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. But then we should what? Go. Take that to your neighbor. Go. Ring the bells. Be the church. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a person that just takes that and just soaks it in for me, although that's important. We need to do that. But then as we soak in it, what happens? It fills us up so much. It just goes. It just overflows. Jesus said in John 7, I am the living water that flows out of you. So it flows out of what? To our neighbor and to our coworker and to our family member, to our student, to the Uber driver's like, oh my gosh, I'm so loved. You got to hear about this. And we show up at people's front doors, and we show up in their driveways, and we show up in their basements, and we show up in their hospital rooms, and we show up in their funeral home. We show up everywhere, be in the church, taking the love of God. That would be a magnet. People would show up here in thousands to be. What is this that compels you to do that? The love of God compels us. Where do you get that? Well, we meet every week, and we refuel and we equip and we train, and then we go be the church. That's what God wants to happen. And so often that never happens, so people are like, I'm not interested in that. It isn't because the weekend service doesn't draw them. It's like the people that supposedly call themselves Christ followers aren't living that way, and so nothing happens. So here's the deal. Jesus said, a new commandment I give you. Love one another. How? With the reckless, overwhelming, never-ending love of God that you've gotten. Now take it out. Anywhere you see a need, go. Go. And it's interesting. If you're like me, you're like, okay, what would that look like? Boy, you go to 1 John. You know, I just read you from the Gospel of John. I don't know if you know this, but John wrote 4 books in the New Testament, and 3 of them are tucked way back, right before the book of Revelation at the end of your New Testament. Listen to what he says. He goes, I'll get real practical what this looks like. He says, this is how we know what love is. I'm not even putting this up there for you. I want you to listen to this. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. We just talked about that. But then what he says, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not live with let us not love with words or speech, but in actions and in truth. In other words, don't fake this thing. Throw that out of here. Action, action, action. The church is really good at talking about love. The church is really bad at doing it. And so he's like, show up. Somebody's got material possessions, show up and help meet that need. Somebody's got a physical condition, show up and be there for them. Pray for them. Pray for God to heal them. Show up and be there. Don't be the church that's not there. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to give you 3 action steps for you and me personally and for us as a church. And the first one is this. They all start with the letter S. For us to live out the love of God, first thing is, I've already said it, show up. Show up. Show up. What's that mean? Somebody's got a need? Get there. Show up. Say that with me. I want to hear you yell it out. Show up. Show up. All right, I know. Whatever. You get it, right? It's like I said, I think I said to Cody this week, or Ann, I said to one of these guys, I said, my motto for the future of Kensington would be this: Kensington, the church that shows up. Wouldn't that be great if we were known in Detroit? Anytime they heard their name Kensington, they would think, oh, that's that church that anytime there's a tragedy, anytime there's something going on that, you know, that Christians should be there, they're the church that shows up. Wouldn't that be great to be known as that? It's actually that way in Cincinnati. There's a guy named Brian Tome that used to come to Kensington back when he was a teenager and got so inspired by Kensington and God called him to be a pastor. He started a church called Crossroads in Cincinnati. And if you look at what they're doing today, you would say, well, the student has outlived the pupil. I mean, the students outlived the teacher. Their church is one of the fastest growing churches in the world. Christianity Today just did an article on what they're doing. And one of the things I love about Crossroads is they go. I remember when the Houston deal happened with hurricanes and floods, about 18 months ago? You know what they did? I thought, we got to do this. I'm telling you right now, I'm casting vision for not hearing what Crossroads did. I want to do what Crossroads did. And we do it in a sense, but here's what they did. They started what they called a first responders email database in their church. Church of about 30,000 people, all these campuses. And what it meant was this: when a tragedy happens anywhere, locally or nationally or even internationally, we want you, if you want to be on the first responder database, to give us your email. And the second it happens, we're going to blast out what we're going to do. And if you can do it, you do it. If you can't, you can't. But you're going to be part of the first responders. So Houston, they sent down teams of teams to Houston as they blasted out this first responder, like, they need us. They need the church to show up. Who's in? And they did I remember I saw, how did I learn about this? Cincinnati Channel 7 News did a story on it. Why? Because when they hear the church doing what the church is supposed to do, non-Christians come running to church and say, what are you doing? This is what should be happening, right? And so they showed up and they went to their seminar, which was sold out. Nobody could get a seat because so many people were there to learn, how can I get involved and be a first responder? And every time something happens in their city or nationally, boom, a database goes in. Are you guys in? Let's do that. Let's be Kensington, the church that shows up. Now, we sort of have that as well, but it's like, man, what would it look like to live out this love others as Christ has loved us? Because guess who's going to show up? Jesus. He shows up every time. But guess how he shows up? Through you and me. He's not going to put a billboard in your neighbor's backyard and say, I love you. Here's how he's going to tell your neighbor that they're loved by him. How? Tell me. You show up. You show up. You are the representative ambassador of the living God in the universe. They have no idea that God really loves them. In fact, they think God doesn't love them because they're in sin. And when you show up and say, I love you and God loves you and I'm here for you, what do you need? And you start meeting those needs. That is absolutely showing up. And by the way, this church does that. Globally, think about the things we've done. I texted Don Anderson, our global leader, just right before I came up here. And I said, Don, give me the current statistics on what we've done globally. Put a hospital in India. Put a school in India. Put an orphanage in India. Who did that? You did. You don't realize when you give, like I just gave to God, you gave to God, and through that, there's a hospital literally saving thousands of people in India that would not be there if Kensington didn't show up. They showed up, and we take trips there. Some of you have been to India. In Africa, Don just told me, through Hope Water, running the marathon in October, hundreds of people, thousands of people have run the marathon or half marathon. Past Saturday, we had a 5K race. People have ridden bikes. By the way, at the 5K race, Orion won. I don't know if you knew that. We had a competition going for who would run the fastest times, and our Shar Kelly and our Blake Ketty beat everybody. They wouldn't give us the trophy because they said I was out of town. I wasn't there. I'm like, you losers. We get the trophy, all right? But we showed up, and we weren't there to just run. We were there to raise money to put wells in Africa. Do you know how many we put in Africa? We've raised over $3 million. 200,000 people in the Pokot tribe in Africa are living with clean water because of the wells we put, over 300 in Africa, through you. You talk about showing up and showing the love of God. That's it. And we've done that locally as well, in Pontiac and different areas. I could go on and on. I mean, I don't have time to do it, but we actually are doing it. Do you know that we have a ministry here called Fuel? Well, it's different things, but we take cars that people donate, we fix them up, and we give them to single moms. I don't know if you knew that. What a beautiful, that's what the church should be doing, loving others as Christ has loved us. It's just an amazing way to actually show up. I could go through all these different things. We have a ministry right here in this trailer park behind us, doing what? Showing up, because that's what the church does. They show up. Secondly, they shine down. Now, I know it's not a good way to say it. What I really want to say is shine the light of Jesus in the darkness, but I added the word down because I got up for show up and I got down for this. Shine down means this: the best way to shine, in my opinion, the light of Jesus to your neighbor is down. What's down mean? Down means serve. You don't reach your neighbor by being arrogant and confident. You reach your neighbor by washing their feet. You can't wash somebody's feet unless you go down. And again, I'm not talking literal here, but I'm talking, what do it look like to be a servant of your neighbor? If you want to write the real word, this principle is really serve. Serve your neighbor. Serve your coworker. Wherever God puts you today or tomorrow, here's what I believe. It's not by coincidence you're beside this person. You're in this cubicle at work, you're like, I don't even like the person on the other side of the cubicle. It's not by coincidence God put you as his light beside this person who's in darkness. And you're thinking, I don't even like them, they curse, they look at porn, I don't really like. God says, I want you to love them as I have loved you. How do you do that? You can talk all day about the love of God, but when you start serving them, they listen. I grabbed a towel because this is the picture of serving. It's literally what Jesus did when he washed their feet. He put a towel over his arm and he served them. But if you ever go to a really nice restaurant, I don't get to go to those a whole bunch, but when you go to a really nice restaurant, the servant will come to your table like this. Don't you love those restaurants? They come and they got the thing over here and like, yeah, baby, serve me, because you're here to serve me, because I'm paying big dollars, and that's what you do. So when you see somebody walking up to you with a towel over their arm like this, you got to love it because you know they're going to serve you. This should be the picture of every Christ follower. Everywhere we go, the people we interact with should feel like we were there to serve and love them with the love of God that God served us with. Do you understand that? What a beautiful, beautiful picture. What that looks like is that everywhere we go, we'd make an impact for the kingdom of God. Some of you know, one of my favorite phrases I came up with years ago was this: make a dent where you're, you know me, I got to rhyme stuff. So yeah, it rhymes. It's like that's our mission in life. Make a dent wherever you're sent. And people all the time ask me whenever I say that, well, how do I know where I'm sent? Am I supposed to pray and God's going to send me somewhere? And I always say the most profound thing you've ever heard me say: how do you know where you're sent? I'll tell you where you're sent. You are sent where you are. Yeah, you guys have listened to this. Some of you remember this, right? You are sent where you are. It's like wherever you are, God has sent you to do what? Make an impact. How do you do that? Show up, shine down, or serve. It's funny, Ann and I did a marriage conference back in March, I think, or April, near Seattle. We've done this marriage conference 3 years in a row out there. We met this, long story, a car dealer, met him on a cruise. He begged us to come speak at his church and do a marriage conference for him. And this guy's literally changing the whole community. He had a radical conversion. His marriage had blown up, separated. They both came to Christ, remarried. It's amazing. He's impacting this church in this area. It's just unbelievable. So every year he brings us out there and says, you got to do Rock Your Family. You got to do vertical marriage. His name's Tim and Kathy. I'm going to bring him here sometime. You got to meet this couple. And anyway, we were out there this last April, and he has a warehouse that he owned as a car dealer that he now converted to a men's ministry warehouse. All right, so he does men's small groups every Monday night for 10 weeks. New group guys, they go through all this stuff. So he took me over there. He's like, I got to show you something in my warehouse. And we get there, and we walk in the lobby, and he shows me this picture. This is so funny. He shows me this picture. Make a dent where you're sent, because he heard me say that on the cruise. And then he has a picture. This picture is me at the marriage conference. Last year, they made me put a Seattle Seahawks bandana on. And they took a picture, and I said, do not let anybody ever see that picture in Detroit, because it looks like I'm a Seahawks fan. I've even got the 12 going for the 12th man. That's their big thing in Seattle. But I thought, isn't it interesting? That's all he's remembered I've ever said. Make a dent where you're sent. Why? Because I want you to remember that too. Wherever God sends you today, which again, if you want to know where that is, it's where you are. That could be some special, it's where you are, in that car, in that neighborhood, in that restaurant, in that dry cleaner. That's where you are. What's God saying? Make a dent. How do I make a dent? Show up, shine down, serve someone. It's so simple, and yet it's profound. Monday night, this past week, in our congregation, one of our dear friends who serves at Kensington Kids and serves on our security team lost his wife to cancer. She died Monday night. And one of our guys that knew Ronnie's sitting right over there right now. Can't believe you're at church today, which is awesome that you're here today, buddy. One of our guys, Ryan, texted Ronnie, I'm hoping I'm getting these details right, Monday night, and said, do you need somebody with you? She's still alive at this point in the hospital. And Ronnie said, I would love it if you come. So what'd Ryan do? He went and sat in the hospital with her husband, Ronnie, for a couple hours, and she died that night. That's the church. Show up, serve. Did Ryan do anything? No. Sat there, prayed. Was the very presence of Jesus in Ronnie's life. Can you imagine what that dude's going through right now? His wife died just a few days ago. What does Ronnie need? What you and I need and our neighbors all need. The very presence of Jesus. And how does that happen? Just show up. Just show up with the love of God that you've received. Go love him. That's all you got to do. Show up. Shine down. And I got one last one, and it's very simple. Speak out. What speak out mean? Speak out why you're showing up. Speak out the love of God you've given. Tell them. Tell them about Jesus. You know, you do it in a loving way, in a tactful way, but don't be so afraid to tell them the answer that they need and are looking for. Speak out the words. In fact, I'm going to close this with a story that I'll never forget that I heard in college. And as I do, we're going to take the offering. So the usher's going to come forward, and you can give while I'm finishing up this sermon. But I thought, the offering is a moment in our lives as well that's like, it's not about talk anymore, it's about walk. You can go to church and say, I love God all of my life, and you never give back financially. It's just words. The offering's a moment to say, I mean this. And it's going to affect everything in my life, including what many people worship, a wallet. And thank you, as we even just voted on the budget. It's crazy. The millions of dollars that people give here online because you say, I'm in. It's not words, it's real. And some of you are brand new today, you don't have to give. You're our guest. Meet me at starting point and see if you take the next step, and then you start giving. But I'll close with this as I'll never forget, Ann and I, we weren't married yet. We were engaged. We went to a retreat in college my senior year, and I'll never forget this couple got up and gave their testimony. They were, we're in our early 20s. They were in their early 60s, I think. Omar and Rose Sutherland. Why do I remember their name? Because I'll never forget their story. They got up on stage and they talked about getting married when they're young and having a beautiful marriage and having kids and being very successful in the Chicago area as a businessman and businesswoman. And then like 10 or 15 years in their marriage, they didn't love each other anymore and had affairs and blew up their marriage and got divorced. I'm sitting there thinking, wow, This is their story, and so they kept going. They said, so Omar said, man, I was chasing everything and alcohol and women and trying to find happiness and joy, and I was completely empty for years after the divorce. He goes, one night I'm sitting in my little tiny apartment all by myself, and I turn on the TV late, and I'm flipping through channels. And some of you are old enough to remember, when he says flipping through channels back then, he wasn't talking about a remote. You had to go up and go click, click, click. How many remember that? Yeah, some of you remember that, like click, click, click. You don't even know how good you have it, next generation. But he'd go up and click on one, no, click on that. And finally, clicked on one, he goes, I don't know why I stayed on this. But I went back to my seat, and it was a Billy Graham crusade. Now, some of you know the name Billy Graham. He just died this past year, and millions celebrated his life because he was an evangelist that went around literally the world and filled stadiums. 80, 90,000, 2 million people in Africa. And he preached one message everywhere he went. Even when he went to Russia, they said, do not share the gospel. And he said, sorry, I can't speak anything else. And he told people about Jesus and his love and his blood and his resurrection. And he asked people to come forward at every stadium, and thousands came to Jesus. So guess what Billy was preaching on TV that night? The same thing. And Omar's saying he's sitting in this thing and he's watching this and he goes, I realize that's what I've been looking for my whole life. He goes, all alone in my little apartment, I got on my knees and I surrendered my life to Jesus. And Omar says, Jesus started to change my life. He started to transform my life. That's what he does. And he goes, over time, I became a new man and a man of God. And he goes, I knew God. I wanted Rose to find out what I found. So he goes back to his former wife and starts talking about Jesus. She's not interested. But guess when she got interested? When she saw it was real in Omar's life. She's like, oh my gosh, this man changed. He wasn't the man he was before. And he kept showing up with the love of God for his former wife. Long story short, she gives her life to Christ. They get remarried. They're now in full-time ministry and they're having an impact all over the world for the kingdom of God. I'll never forget the story, but here's what I'll never forget. At the very end, Omar said this. He said, here's the amazing thing. I'm a businessman and I'm literally lost, looking for answers. And every day of my life, before I found Christ, I was in business meetings with Christians who never once told me. He goes, I would go play golf with followers of Christ. Never once did any of them speak out the love of God. I had to find Jesus through a TV show when I walked beside Christians every day of my life and nobody spoke out. So church, I challenge you, show up, shine down and serve. And when it's right, and when God leads you and nudges you, don't be too afraid. Speak out the name Jesus. Speak out the answer. Because you don't know this, but it's true. They are looking for an answer. They're covering it all up with their life and all their stuff and all their success, but deep down they're as empty as you and I were before Christ, and they don't know the answer, and you got it. And when you speak out, literally, you could be a life changer and a legacy changer. So here's how we're going to end today. We're going to sing a couple songs. First one's Build My Life. You know what that song's all about? Build my life on the love of God. It's the firm foundation of God. How can you overflow the love of God unless you have the love of God in you? And then we're going to end, and they didn't prepare this morning. They just did it because I talked so much about the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. We're going to sing that as well. Because it's one, build my life, fill me up, and then help me to take that overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God out to the community to make a difference. So church, go ahead, stand up. Let's sing this thing. Let's sing it strong. Let's sing it loud, and then let's go live it.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. let's get after it. Sing it to the King. Here we go. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You've been so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life. You've been so kind to me. One every voice. Oh, the
in that song I love. But as we just sang, there's no shadow you won't light up. There's no wall you won't kick down. What's that mean? When you're in darkness, when you're struggling, when you're in the valley, guess who shows up? Jesus. Every time. He doesn't abandon you. He literally walks with you and brings his power and presence and peace and love to fill your darkness with his light. And then when your neighbor is in that shadow darkness, guess who shows up? Jesus. How? Through you. Understand this. When you walk across the backyard today to your neighbor, to their deck, maybe you've never done it. That's what the church does. That's what Jesus does. Walks over. You better understand this. The light of God goes with you to their darkness to love them and draw them like a magnet to the love that has overwhelmed your life. And we just sang about, now we get to go live it. We just went vertical, and now let's go horizontal. Let's live this thing out. I hope God spoke to you with a name or a thought or a situation. Man, I want to step in and bring the light of God there and be the church. Man, do it. Don't wait a week. Do it today or do it tomorrow. Do it this week. And I was sitting over there, or standing over there singing, and I thought, man, I sweat pretty bad this service too. That's preaching right there, baby. That's preaching. Actually, I never sweat like that, so that's a fever. I need a cowbell to answer my fever. That's what I need. Anyway, here's the thing. As you walk out of here to go do it, there's some of you need to walk forward. Seriously, this is your day to either give your life to Jesus or you're carrying something that you need to release with our prayer team. Just lift it up. Come up here. We'll pray with you. We'll let that go to God and then walk out of here free to go take the light of Jesus to wherever he's calling you and I to be the church. Last thing, next week, you know what next week is, right? You better know what next week is. It's the most important day on the calendar of the whole year. Father's Day, and it's going to be a special day here at Kensington. Don't miss it. God bless. See you.